Hi, I'm Jeff Murrah. I want to welcome you to True Texas History. Today we have another fascinating episode about one of those characters in Texas history that many people don't know a lot about. And this is one that was by special request. They wanted to know about Earl Van Dorn. Earl Van Dorn, of course, if you research him, Wikipedia and stuff, you're going to get one picture of him. This is one of those that you really have to dig into the details. He was born in 1820 in Port Gibson, Mississippi. Now, Port Gibson is a nice little town. If you ever have a chance to go there, they got some splendid antebellum homes. And in fact, during the war, when Grant was going through there, he considered the town too pretty to burn. But this is where he grew up. And not much is known of his life until he got an appointment to go to the United States Military Academy at West Point, and that was secured by his uncle, none other than President Andrew Jackson. So Earl Van Dorn was the nephew of President Andrew Jackson. He graduated in 1842. Of course, a lot of the articles want to play up the fact that he was down toward the bottom of his class. Why they do that, I don't know. The thing is, the man distinguished himself again and again and again. He distinguished himself in the war with Mexico. Start off with a whole series of things. Because he went into the war a lieutenant and came out a major. That says something. But he raised the flag at Fort Brown after Mexican artillery had shot it down. And he went on the battlefield, showed gallantry, courage, bravery, and impressed the commanders. He also fought in the Seminole War. And he was not just a warrior. He made it a point of going ahead and volunteering to care for yellow fever victims in Pascagoula, Mississippi. A lot of those places on the Gulf, we forget about the pandemics back in the 19th century. Yellow fever was dreaded and very infectious, and he was willing to risk his life by going ahead and going there. And then eventually he came to Texas with the 2nd Cavalry. Now, the 2nd Cavalry, talk about a military unit with giants. The unit itself was commanded by a colonel by the name of Albert Sidney Johnston. Johnson had already distinguished himself as the commander-in-chief of the Republic of Texas Army. Had been in the U.S. Army prior to that. And he is going to go on and distinguish himself later on in the Confederate Army. He also has a distinction of being the highest-ranking military American officer ever killed in combat, Albert Sidney Johnston. And his lieutenant colonel was Robert E. Lee. Can you imagine serving in a unit with these people? But the 2nd Cavalry was brought to Texas. They fought the Comanches. There were times that Earl Van Dorn was wounded a couple of times, once in the lungs and somewhere else. He'd recovered and he was ready to go again. This man was a fighter. He also led the Wichita expedition. Now, this was an expedition into the Indian Territory, but they also laid trails. And in some of the counties that they went ahead and laid these trails, they were the first trails ever laid in those counties, anything resembling a road. That was Earl Van Dorn. Now, when the war between the states broke out, Earl Van Dorn went ahead, when the trouble started, he resigned his commission and wanted to serve his native state of Mississippi, which he initially started to do. Then he was brought to Texas. He was in charge of the Confederate forces that when the U.S. Forces went ahead and surrendered, he captured many of them and essentially did the mop-up operations of the Union forces in the forts located here in Texas, because a lot of the forts, they were abandoned, but you had all these Yankee troops running around Texas, and he was responsible for that. He had some early victories in the war in 1861, which led to him going ahead and being promoted to Major General. Now, later on, he experienced some defeats at Pea Ridge and a few other locations. Now, I want to talk about that for a moment. Now, Earl Van Dorn, after Pea Ridge, he had some other assignments. Now, some of those assignments included constructing fortifications at strategic locations such as Vicksburg and also Corinth, Mississippi. He built these forts, and those forts later on in the war, hundreds, if not thousands of men died trying to take them. And Earl Van Dorn was the mastermind who went ahead and developed them. Now, Earl Van Dorn was later defeated at the Battle of Corinth. Of course, at the Battle of Corinth, all these fortifications he made, the Confederate forces abandoned them, then the Yankees went ahead and occupied them, and then the Confederates tried to take them again, and in the process of doing so, experienced defeat. So, I mean, yes, Earl Van Dorn was defeated militarily, but it was also his brilliant construction of defenses that made that possible. He eventually was sent to Spring Hill, Tennessee, and this is where the story gets very interesting. In Tennessee, he was in charge of the town, and one of the local physicians, a Dr. Peters, accused Earl Van Dorn of sleeping with his wife while he was out of town. And Peters eventually took things into his own hand and shot Earl Van Dorn. Ironically, shot him as Earl Van Dorn was writing out a military pass to allow him to go through the lines. Which is just, there's some strange stuff. And some of the people want to go ahead and lay up the salacious aspect of this episode, claiming that he had an affair. But the strange irony is, although the Peters went ahead and acted like they were going through a divorce and split up and left the town, several months later they showed up in Arkansas, and it just so happened that they were given a large parcel of land in Arkansas. And so there is some suspicion that the Peters were actually spies and were setting Earl Van Dorn up for some problems. Now, this is why a lot of times when you read those stories about the shady activities of people, there may be another story behind it. I mean, the shady stuff sells the stories, but like in the case of Earl Van Dorn, there may be something to the other part of his life. Earl Van Dorn was an interesting figure, in terms of his abilities. Like I say, the modern press plays down his military abilities, but the fact is, he built some major fortifications that made a huge impact in terms of the outcome of the war. And he may have been taken out by some Yankee spies as opposed to being the victim of a jealous husband. Who knows? With a little more research, I might be able to find the truth. I know that Earl Van Dorn's, I believe his daughter, or I believe it was his daughter, was definitely of the opinion that her dad was not having an affair and had been the victim of this spying episode. So, anyways, that's a story of Earl Van Dorn and his accomplishments. He did make some accomplishments in Texas, starting to lay some of the early trails, and in some of those early battles with the Comanches, having suffered wounds. So there you have it, Earl Van Dorn. Until next time, vaya con Dios, my friends. Goodbye.